very warm welcome to Professor Emeritus Terry Gunnell from the University of Iceland,
Thank you.
from the Department of Folkloristic and specifically expert in Old Norse religion. I'm super happy that you take the time to have a
Thanks for
chat with me
inviting me.
here
Thanks.
about masks and so on.
Yes, most definitely.
Which is a wonderful topic. I'm fascinated by masks. But could you perhaps you could just start by mentioning a little bit what is your background and your specific interest in.
Right. So my background is so I'm a Brit. I'm from England, Brighton, and through much of my life, from about the age of 7, I was doing drama, and then studied drama and theatre arts at the University of Iceland back in the 70s. And when I later went on to be looking at Old Norse literature, Icelandic material, then what I was particularly interested in is something I'd taken up as my BA essay initially, which was the history of Icelandic theatre. But that began with a book by Bertha Philpotts, a female scholar from Britain, who'd written back in the 1920s a book about what she called ancient Scandinavian drama. And what was so interesting about this was that this was an idea that she'd presented and then had been sort of ignored by scholars after that time. In fact, she was told in one review that this was a very good book for a woman, for example. And it was a very male
That's
area
very chauvinist.
Absolutely.
And as then, compliments go.
And then she went on to write more general books, but just dropped this idea completely. But that got me looking at these early poems, and as a performer, and many of them are written as monologues and dialogues. And I was wondering, as a performer, is it possible to perform these works without going into drama, without stepping into role or character? Which, to my mind, became clearer all the time that it was very, very difficult. And that was what I suggested as a doctoral thesis with Rory McTurk in Leeds. And what I was doing there is partly looking at how the poems work, partly looking at the manuscripts, which have some very interesting markings in the margins. Names of characters are never part of the poems. They are, in a dialogue, they're pushed out into the margin as if it's extra material for performance. And the same thing then looking at the history of is there anything suggesting that anything dramatic was going on in the Old Norse times? And that led to looking at all of the archaeological material that was available, and then also looking at later folklore to see, is there anything that suggests there were traditions of drama of any kind. And of course, in terms of the visual, of course, in terms of archaeology, you can't really prove that anybody's going into drama. The most obvious thing is that people are wearing strange costumes and making use of masks. And there was quite a lot of material of this kind which did suggest that masks were being used. And masks are the most obvious example of changing character, becoming something else while you are yourself, which is the most obvious thing for any form of drama.
Yeah.
And that
can you mention
also change the surrounding? Yeah.
So absolutely. You say there are many cases where you can see costumes or
Yes, the oldest ones are rock carvings, especially from the north of Norway and Alta, where you clearly have at least one figure who has horns, but also is wearing a costume over the top, an animal skin, and is not just standing still, but is dancing in some way or other.
All the way up from Alta. Those are
this
ancient.
Is very early Bronze Age elsewhere, but it's still Stone Age up there.
Yeah, okay.
And then you go on from there to look at the rock carvings in Bohuslän in the south of Sweden, which is, and the period now we're looking at is about 1,500 to 500 BC. And a lot of examples there of people clearly with horns, but also the most obvious is they're taking on the roles of birds. We can see them with bird wings, and also elements of sound, horns, dancing, things of this kind. And as we move on from that period, then we go into the Iron Age, roughly 500 AD, and the most obvious there is the Torslunda, which is a helmet plates, which clearly show one character who is dressed up in an animal costume, and then another character dancing in front of him with a horned helmet.
Mhm.
We also have the masks from a slightly later time from Hedeby, for example. Nowadays in Germany, but then Danish. Let's say that they're Danish initially. for the Danish
Isn't
listeners,
anywhere
just to
basically.
start another war. But certainly there we have at least two animal masks that were
Mhm.
in the fillings on the side of ships, along with tar to keep water out of the boats. And then if we go off to yet another example to show how widespread this is, we can go off to Istanbul, Constantinople,
Mhm.
Miklugardet, as it was called at that time. And around the year 1000, we have a description of a performance called the Gothicon, which is
Mhm.
Goths, clearly, who are obviously not English performers. They're almost, the likelihood is that we're dealing with Gotland, the island of Gotland, Östergötland, Västergötland, and also Jylland, I think, in Denmark is another possibility,
Mhm.
where we have a description of groups of people wearing animal costumes, dancing in circles,
Mhm.
and shouting various things with weapons and masks. So obviously, these are just a few examples, but there are clearly there's evidence of masked traditions taking place as part of Old Norse religion.
Okay. Is just as a little side
Yep.
note, when we're doing a Christmas masking event in Copenhagen, that we're kind of, you could say, playfully sort of bringing in folklore from a lot of different periods. We're actually using a little element dialoguing with this the Gothic dance there, which is that they're supposedly, or some have interpreted that they were shouting Yule, Yule,
Yep.
Yule,
Yeah.
and so we just took that in. So we're shouting Yule,
Nice.
Yule, Yule when we're going through Copenhagen, and I'm actually not sure that the spelling is certain that it is actually Yule that they were shouting, but we're
No.
dialoguing with it like that.
And I was just watching again Robert Eggers' Northman film yesterday because I have to
Hmm.
talk about this to some students later this week.
Yeah.
And he makes use of the Gothicon somewhere in there.
Okay. Yeah.
As
But you
there
were
is a sort of dance.
you were a consultant on that,
Yes,
weren't you? Yeah.
Neil Price was doing most of the archaeology, and my role was looking especially at the supernatural and the religion and
Yeah.
things like masks. Yes.
Yeah. Because there were some performance situations in that film where you could really see, okay, someone who knows about stuff have actually been looking at that, like people holding up rings, I seem to remember, or
Yes,
these
absolutely,
sort of
and
things.
the horned helmet
Yeah.
figures and the animal costumes and things of this
Yeah.
kind. Robert had done a lot of reading before either Neil or I met him. So yeah, yes, there's also one initiation scene where you've got a sort of masked figure there too, and
Hmm.
there's another scene that was cut out,
Yeah.
which you can get on the DVD.
Okay. Cool.
But
That's a little plug here for the for
little
the
plug,
for the fans. um,
absolutely.
so, like, take a good example or I don't know. I think a beautiful example of a Nordic masking is these
Right.
horned headgear, as they've been
Yeah.
called. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that? What is that, and what would that be doing? What would be the function of that in a ritual performance?
Still really certain. The horns are something that we see right the way through, even if you go to rock carvings in France, for example, Stone
Hmm.
Age period. There you clearly have again the horned animal and then skins being used at the same time. Likelihood, and one can only guess. Of course, there's no text along with archaeological archaeological objects, although we can go to comparative material, which we can take up later on. Almost certainly, I would reckon up in Alta, it's a matter of calling animals to you, for hunters. It's a little bit like you see, of course, continuing traditions up in the north and amongst the Sami people. For quite a long time afterwards, we do have the use of masks and dances. And for the Sami people, hunter-gatherer people up in the north, then it's going to always be to do with the animal and trying to control the world around you, which is partly what ritual is all about. Trying to communicate with the other powers, trying to win them over, trying to get them to follow your dreams and desires. When we come down to southern Sweden and the Bohuslän, Tanum area, again, it's horns. Horns are clearly, certainly they show you that it's a human being acting a role, sort of immediately. If they look like a human being and they've got horns, then there's obviously something going on there. It gives you, of course, everybody would like to have the idea of Vikings with horned helmets later on, but there's no evidence that people wore horned helmets in daily life. It might have looked pretty neat, but not very good in battle when it comes down to it. So it's a sort of fashion accessory if they're going to be wearing it daily. In battle, it's a good way of having your neck broken, and someone's going to grab the horns. Yeah. But the earliest examples that we have, again, seem to be ritual, and again, it's an element of power, I would reckon, of one form or another.
Yeah.
And what is certainly interesting, if we go on from there, to start looking at comparative material, from pretty early in Norway, at least, we have evidence, and Iceland as well. There is evidence of traditions where people are dressing up in skins, and often figures that have horns. And when we come to certainly Denmark, it's the julebuk, for example, or same in Norway, julebok, Norway and Sweden as well, and sometimes the julegeit, which are very, very widespread. Especially if we take Norway, where the tradition continued. It was banned in Denmark, easier to ban there. But in Norway, certainly deep in the countryside, it's not based on cities, it's spread out into the countryside. And this idea of people dressing up in skins, again, with horns, and then going around the local community, seemingly blessing it in some way or other, and close connections to Christmas, again, as we have there.
Yeah.
So it does seem that there's good reason to believe these traditions didn't begin with Christianity, who would, of course, perhaps connected it to the devil in some way or other. It's not connected to the devil. It's very widespread, which suggests, again, something about the age of it, and that the earliest evidence is somewhere around 1400.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, this is my best answer, at least on that. But in that case of those, it's essentially a matter of underlining who belongs to the community and blessing them by, in a sense, visiting the whole community and playing a game with them where they have to try and guess who you are. But these figures will say that they are supernatural, they're coming from outside, they're non-human, and they are backed up by legends which tell of visits of supernatural figures, the wild ride, coming around communities and taking over farmhouses, which the mask backs up the story backs up the mask.
Yeah. I'd like to just connect back to something you said a little bit earlier here, because you said at some point that the mask portrays that there's something other, but there's also a human in there. Can you talk a little bit to like exactly why is that, and how does that work in a performance or in a mask, or perhaps in a mask ritual?
When you put on a mask, and what the effect of that? Absolutely. So, best way to put this, let's imagine. So, if a mask is found archaeologically, it's in the ground, it says a great deal. First of all, it says that somebody put on that mask, and then that mask was put on for somebody else to see. And what's it doing to the person who puts on that mask? It changes them immediately. Partly because if it's a full face mask, the audience can no longer see the expressions.
Yeah.
It's going to change the sound of the voice
Yeah.
immediately as well. It changes the sort of power dynamic because the person in the mask can see the audience. The audience can't see who they are, so it gives them power immediately.
Yeah.
And that will immediately not also, if we think of the people are in a surroundings. It will change the surrounding immediately because of the whole difference in the power balance. It's a strange character that's entered the room. We had here in this flat once where we and our kids were visited by a Santa Claus figure. We knew pretty well who it was. But he came down and sat in the lounge on the sofa with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was very uncomfortable all
Yeah.
round because he changed the room. It shouldn't have been there. We didn't know exactly who it was. We couldn't hear who it was. And I know certainly, as I've described somewhere, a Norwegian folklorist, when we were doing a conference about masking up in the north, up in Finland, she was sitting outside having a coffee, and somebody came out with a mask and sat down beside her, and she just screamed,
Yeah.
had a fit,
Yeah.
dropped a coffee or whatever it was, but just couldn't deal with us.
Yeah.
And
Can
immediately
be quite
also what it will
scary.
do, it very, very scary
I remember
because of this
reading.
lack of communication. Yeah.
I remember reading from your anthology, Masks and Mumming, I think in the northern area,
In the
a
Nordic area, yeah.
description, and I think it was from the Orkney Isles, where some specific maskers came into a kitchen and the people in there were positively
Yeah.
terrified. They were terrified
Yeah.
because of these otherworldly presence that had just come in there. It was a very kind of touching description of their horror, actually.
Absolutely. This was a story from Shetland,
Okay,
and these were
Shetland.
huge straw figures that came into a room, and
Hmm.
somebody was going to get a blunderbuss and shoot them because they were so terrified of these things.
Yeah.
But they were just those figures, those masks are just huge, and again, you can't see the face. You just get, and they don't speak. They make animal noises,
Yeah.
so they're grunting. A wonderful description, if any of your listeners can get hold of it, is a story by William Hjarnø from Faroe Islands
Hmm.
called Grydland,
Yeah.
which describes this sort of tradition on one of the more northerly islands, and it is excellent for the description of what it's like to be in the mask and how it is to receive the mask.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm going to check that
So
out.
the room, as I say, the dynamic in the room changes, and immediately you're put into. If we talk about a person, an actor is two characters at once. Suddenly, the room is turned into two worlds at once, which is very
Okay.
uncomfortable. It's the world of the masking figure, where it's stepped in from the supernatural, and the daily world. And the other thing to remember here is that we're not dealing with a stage. It's one thing looking at a stage and actors on a stage and being in an audience. Here, there is no stage and audience. This is in your kitchen, your
Yeah.
lounge, and will
And in many of
immediately
these traditions,
change the
they're
surround.
very interaction focused, I think.
Absolutely, which is what many of the Eddic poems do as well. So there we have a character who is talking to people who either aren't there or they're calling members of the audience certain other characters. They're changing the space. They're turning the members of the hall into, for example, the dead, the Einherjar warriors. If a person acting Hamlet comes into your lounge and starts talking about Elsinore Castle, then they see Elsinore Castle, you see your lounge.
Yeah.
And it's a question of which reality is right. If you understand, it's
Yeah.
changing the space
Yeah.
pretty powerfully for a short period until they leave and things go back to normal again. So the mask, once you find a mask, it underlines something like this has taken place. It suggests there's a story behind it. It's that this is a character. It also has whatever the performance is, it has a beginning and an end as
Yeah.
well. The mask is put on and it's taken off. So
Yeah.
there's a whole pile of things you can assume have taken place when you find a mask. It's very different to finding a teacup. It suggests something of this kind has taken place, and why is the next question. Why do it? Why put on the mask?
Yeah.
So the performative is clearly very much a very part of these traditions, both in the past and up into the present, and up into modern school traditions. Demission, for example, you call it demission, I think, in Denmark. It's school leaving traditions
Yeah,
when
something like
students
that.
dress up in costumes,
Hmm.
and then they invade classrooms.
Yeah,
We have the same age group, which is the pre-marriage male group. It used to be in the past. Now it's both sexes. But the desire to dress up and invade and turn and introduce a Saturnalia is still there
yeah.
when we come down to
Can
it.
you?
And we can come into protest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say Saturnalia, can you describe what is that which is being brought there by the invasion of other?
Yeah, Saturnalia is from Roman times, was a festival set around Christmas time. And it was a matter
Mm.
of, and it turned everything inside out. The lower became the higher became the lower. There's other
Yeah.
traditions in the church, the boy bishop traditions. We
Hmm.
have from the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the carnival
Yeah.
traditions, the Feast of Fools.
Yeah.
Again, the same sort of idea: momentary, chaotic turning things upside down,
Yeah. Yeah.
and introducing the supernatural into the present.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I'm very interested in
Hmm.
all this stuff and have a lot of like
Yeah, I know.
thoughts about it.
You've
Uh,
always been interested in.
yeah. Um, so one specific example of finding, actually, let me just ask you, could you sum up like the most spectacular example of finding a mask from perhaps all of Northern Europe that I know that you've written about? You probably know which one I'm talking about. Sutton Hoo.
Uh, the Sutton Hoo, right. Well, we can actually take two. The Sutton Hoo helmet is particularly interesting because it's a helmet that was pretty fragmented nonetheless, but found
Hmm.
in a grave mound, an Anglo-Saxon grave mound in the southeast of England. And when that was reassembled, and they've tried to reassemble it several times, then first of all, on the outside, you've got some helmet plates, what seem to be just above the eyes, which show these dancers with a horned helmet that I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
But then the helmet itself, it sort of covers. You've got eye holes in it and a moustache. Um, and first of all, when it's put on, it will change the voice completely. Secondly, the eyes of the wearer disappear in
Hmm.
darkness because this figure's going to appear inside a hall with only firelight and smoke. And then one of the eyes, and I think it's the right hand eye, I'm not sure, only one of the eyes in darkness will light up, like there's
Yeah.
a sort of line around the eye, not on the other side, which suggests that this is a one-eyed figure.
Yeah.
Um, and so we have a mask helmet, and
Yeah.
one of the words for helmet in the past used to be grima, which means mask when it comes down to it.
And it's also a name
So
for
here,
Odin, right?
yeah, it's one of Odin's names, and
Yeah.
and again we have the one-eyed figure, and as Neil Price has been pointing out, and a little advert here for anybody interested, take a look at a book called Viking Dynasties, which has come out
Hmm.
about the Leira and Uppsala. And as Neil shows there, then one of the eyes on the Torslunda helmet plate figure is missing, and on a number of other Odin figures, that the eye is missing. They're finding more and more objects which have one eye taken out of them.
Okay. Okay.
And it's been scratched. So they began with two eyes and have one later on. So there seems to be a sort
Yeah.
of takeover. But yes, the helmet itself has one eye which lights up in the
Yeah.
darkness. And that will, in a sense, introduce Odin into the room, which will change
Yeah.
the whole space.
Let me just mention, like, you probably wrote about exactly this in the article. It's some time ago that I read it, unfortunately. But the actual king that was buried in the Sutton Hoo
Yep.
burial, that
Mhm.
don't they actually have a rather exact idea of the name of that king? One and two, is that one of those Anglo-Saxon kings who actually regard their descendants, his descendants from Woden, because that would then make the whole thing. It would click the whole thing into place.
Certainly, yeah. The I can't remember the name, whether it's Rugvald or something of this kind. Neil Price and John Mortimer wrote the article about the helmet mask first,
Yeah.
and there's somebody who's been looking since then. People have been looking at who might be in the grave, and
Okay.
certainly, as you say, the Anglo-Saxon rulers of this period, many of them seem to have traced their genealogy back to Odin.
Yeah.
And the other interesting side of it too is that the helmet plate, with the sort of dancer, they've also found almost exactly the same helmet plates in Uppsala.
Okay.
There's a corner of it with the dancing figure with the crossed spears, which underlines a close connection between those people in Britain and then also the Valsjärva Vendel period of people in Sweden.
Yeah. Those in my memory, those two groups of archaeology, they look almost
Yeah,
astonishingly identical. And it's funny that it's Sweden and England. There's a
yeah.
little bit of that stuff in Denmark. I think they found one spear dancer in Denmark,
Yeah.
but it's very characteristic in
No, I have a
Sweden.
strong suspicion myself that at least we have a movement up from Denmark into Sweden, which leads
Okay,
on to this. And there was reason to
usually,
do it, at least with the Ingvaones, according to Tacitus, much earlier, suggest that there was floods in the north of Jutland, I think, and then that caused the Ingvaones to move, and one wonders where they moved to.
okay.
Um,
Wouldn't they usually think the other way, that people would be coming from the east, and
in
the ethnic group
some
called the Danes today, which perhaps in the Iron Age would have been located a little bit further east, and the Jutes would perhaps be a little bit more English Frisian bend in their language at that point.
I think they're going in both directions. Certainly,
Possibly,
we
yeah,
have the Danish invasion of England by Knut and people before that.
yeah,
But you also have moves. There's a lot of trade links certainly coming up between the new kingdoms, Lyra, Jelling,
yeah.
Tisse, and then in Sweden. But the horned helmet evidence suggests a move up from sort of Germany into Denmark, from Denmark onto Gotland into
Okay,
inland, and the most recent version then being found on Oseberg,
okay,
with the
yeah,
Oseberg tapestry, the same sort of figure. So
hmm,
that seems to be a sort of Inglingar move when we come to it in the long run. But
okay,
yes, these are all closely connected, I think, when it comes down to it, and especially ways of underlining power, your connection
yeah,
to the gods,
yeah,
and especially not that you go and visit the gods, but actually you become the god.
hmm,
I think
yeah.
this is what seems to be going on as a way of underlining your power to your large armies and courts.
Mhm. There seems to be a mixing going on. Like, if we have, say, a ruler who is from a noble family that counts its descendants from, say, Odin or Woden, then the mixing, there's already a mixing in that idea. Like that, perhaps there's some of that deity sort of inside that and that person, but then putting on the mask that mixes the human in with the deity
Right.
in some way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have, of course, there's a lot of mixing going on when we start looking at the material, the aesthetic material and archaeological material before that, with these huge halls of these new leaders, national leaders,
Mhm.
who are coming into being after about 500. But they are the connection between the hall and Valhall, for
Mhm.
example, the same idea of a ruler who sits there, rules over the dead who are serving him. And in a sense, but the creation of Odin, which we're all looking at the moment, I talk about the creation of Odin. What you're having to do as a ruler at this time is you're bringing in warriors from all over the country, all over the area, who are coming to
Hmm.
work for you. Normally, they would work for the clan head, for the family head. But what you're doing is bringing in, especially younger sons who are not going to get land through inheritance, to serve you. They're coming in with different religions, different beliefs in gods, Freyj, Thor, whatever.
Mm.
Um, the best way is to turn yourself into a pseudo father, a pseudo create a pseudo clan, you're a pseudo father, and if they come in with other gods, your god is higher than their gods. He's an
Hmm.
all father, and you are the all father in a
Mm.
sense. It is a blending of the two of them
Yeah.
to get people to die for you in the belief that they're going to be taken on to a wonderful paradise hall later on.
Of sex,
It's
drugs, and rock and roll. But
right, and in many ways uh, we're watching the same sort of performances going on when we look to America at the moment,
yeah,
um,
a f-
and the
I
same sort of
think,
duty to the ruler who likes to turn himself
yeah,
into being a godlike figure.
I actually think that with Donald Trump, but it's a whole separate train of thinking. But I think what Donald Trump does is that he actually create a very Saturnalian figure.
Yep,
He's very trollish. He's very carnivalesque in his way of being. He's grotesque in his language.
yep,
He can invert language from he can contradict himself from sentence to sentence,
yep,
and people love him for it. He can lie openly and people love him for it. It's almost as a manifestation of Loki in our time, that inversion. And and this, I think, has therefore I think Donald Trump, when we talk about masking and carnivals, I think he is very much stepping into the role of what in medieval Europe was called the carnival king.
yep,
And there are some researchers who actually believe that carnival kings, like carnivals as these socially upending spaces, have the potential for social renewal. And that can go in many directions. Some believe actually that monarchies may have sprung from play kings and clown kings and carnival rulers like Donald Trump. And that's why I think Donald Trump, in many ways, what is so dangerous about him is that he really strikes these very deep notes, actually, in people of European descent, in our cultural base. That carnival ruler that changes things, but then also perhaps becomes a king.
yeah.
I think, well, that is not particularly
Absolutely.
controversial to say, but I think right
Well,
now, American democracy is totally compromised by a potential shift into monarchy or fascism.
absolutely. And this orange mask,
Yeah, yeah,
which the guy
totally.
starts off with, and
And
the Nuremberg like gatherings,
yeah,
these gatherings in the hall, the white
mhm,
the office, all of these things as a
yeah,
performance of power.
yeah,
So bringing us back to the mask, certainly it's an element of people being taken into a sort of liminal world
yeah.
around him, bowing down to this godlike figure that he's
Mm.
created for himself.
But I then feel like asking, but why have uh, say, let's call it the left wing. I don't know how leftist you are, Terry. I'm pretty leftist.
No, I'm there.
Why has that carnival power, the kind of the mystery of the mask, why has that been so lost uh, to people who seemingly want to create a harm in the world, and don't seem invested in producing kindness based and respect based social structure? Like, shouldn't the power of the mask that you're talking about, shouldn't that be harnessed in service of, and which it probably has been in many times through history? It's, you know when you think about masks, you'd mostly think about something that is fun and entertaining and probably done by people who wants to challenge, for instance, or authoritarian power systems, or who wants to, I don't know, produce egalitarian ways of being in the world. I mean, that would be my sort of intuition.
I think truth and falsity is perhaps the key element here. I think,
Mm.
of course, politics itself has been always becoming much more performance-based,
Yeah,
as with
good
the
point.
arrival of television. Were radio initially, but especially television when we come to Richard Nixon's sweat and whatever else, helping him lose a debate.
Hmm.
And the book for your listeners to look out for is Richard Schechner's Performance Studies and Introduction, which goes into the element of performance very effectively. But I think, of course, if we compare them, Kennedy, for example, Obama in particular, yes, there was performance. Yes, Obama, in his inauguration, he took on, he got on the Abraham Lincoln train. He arrived on Martin Luther King Day. He called out U2 and people to perform for him. But there was a lot of references going on in terms of role. His speeches often link into sort of Martin Luther King. But the difference is that politicians, in spite of this element of performance, there is an element of wanting to maintain truth. What's happening at the moment is a total loss of interest in truth at all.
Yeah.
Now it's stepped in what it calls out everything else as being fake. It's moved right into the world of fake.
Yeah, we're talking about the post-truth world
We're
that we're
talking
living
definitely
in.
post-truth.
You could
In
call
spite of a
it
figure who talked about
post-enlightenment.
truth social and whatever else, it's lies from the beginning to end.
Yeah.
So we're what's happening here is what, in a sense, well, of course, which left are we talking about? If we're talking about Stalin, that's sort
Of
of
course.
left, and that's when left meets right.
That's a fascist,
On
murderous
exactly
regime.
on the other side. But sort of the social democrat left, at least, as I would say, and even the good side of the right, truth, sincerity is the aim. Even though you're encouraged to try and avoid the things you don't want to be seen, here we have a complete creation of falsity.
Yeah, yeah.
Going with falsity
But
from beginning to end. It's what Hitler did. It's what the Roman emperors did. It's what Mussolini did, and
but it
Stalin. Yeah.
like if we I don't know, I feel like moving the perspective a little bit away from the strong dichotomy between falsehood and truth. If we
Hmm.
think of the mask, then it is in a sense a a lie. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
perhaps in an original perspective, or perhaps if you have a Raven clan masker in a Haida Raven clan in the Northwest Pacific, then that man putting that mask on, that expresses a deeper reality of him, that he is he's Raven kin as part of that. So the mask is bringing out a truth, you could say, and shouldn't it be possible to yield the carnival and the mask in service of kindness and respect? Like another example, I've worked with African Brazilian religion, in which masking is a huge element of what is going on. They possess their deities and then they perform them, and they perform them with dances and with maskings, so they or costumes. But there are also face coverings as part of that. Then they also have cultural narratives that talk about how when we were enslaved and brought here to Brazil, we masked our deities. So deities like Shango and Obatala, and a thunder god and an all father god, they were masked under the Catholic saints of the people who had enslaved us. So we could continue to worship our deities under that mask. This is today called the myth of the mask in this particular culture, and they have a very deep, I would say, covenant with the trickster. They have this trickster who is both poetry, but also lies, but also a primordial initiative for everything to start. Any story that always begins with him doing something trickstery. So he's a deep creator force, but simultaneously also very much he has to be controlled. If he's not controlled, then everything just goes to shit. So he's always invoked in front of any ritual, for instance, that has to happen, but then he's also sent away or controlled by specific deities that have the controlling function in relation to him. So, and these are people who have, in my view, an incredibly kindness-based way of being in the world. Their spiritual spaces are radically inclusive, and that's sexually and racially and in any parameter you can think of. And the mask and the trickster plays such a vital role in their capacity to basically continue or allow this, in my view, very beautiful culture to continue to exist through the ages. And so I feel I feel we need that masking. We need to not only understand it as lies but let me give you an image of this. Like when we read the Nordic mythology, we always see this relation between the Jotun forces, the chaos beings, and the Aesir Vanir deities. These beings are in relation. And for instance, in one good example is the Grotti Songar, where Frodi's realm is upheld by these Jotun women who are grinding this millstone. And then at some point, he pressures them too hard. So he kind of breaks the bond, the social contract, the covenant with these forces that are really outside of the human sphere. And then they turn on him and everything collapses. Like, I feel that the problem with, for instance, Donald Trump is not that he's carnivalesque or that he's a troll, but that we have lost contact with him. And now he's standing in Nagelfar, steering towards the complete collapse of everything, rather than being in a perhaps troublesome, perhaps negotiated, perhaps in many ways problematic relation with social kindness-based spaces that we would want our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to grow up in. You follow my thinking?
Yeah, I do. I think we're going to put it, the mask is, we've looked at the effect it has of creating a new world, of changing dynamics, of introducing the supernatural, of encouraging people to behave in a different way, breaking down moral rules for a minute. Even the audience, often with a Yoda book, when it comes in, will be grabbing the Yoda book in different ways to the way it would normally grab a human being in daily life to find out if it's male or female.
Yeah.
Things of this kind. It introduces this, and there's often a lot of drinking involved with it at the same time. It introduces this sort of carnival. But it's a question of which way so that's there. It's a question which way it's used.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm what's coming up in my mind immediately on one side is Trump's Nuremberg gatherings, and then Bruce Springsteen in Manchester sitting on the edge of the stage and talking about what's going on in America. And that's using it. There's a difference, but the same thing is happening. And Springsteen's not wearing a mask, but he's dressed up as Bruce Springsteen in a sense.
Yeah.
He's got the guitar. He hasn't got the mask, but he's sort of got a mask.
Amazing example. Yeah.
Yeah, and incredible audiences listening to everything that's being said, and there's a huge amount of power within that moment of us. But it's a question of how it's used.
Yeah.
Is it going to be used for good, or are you going to send people out into the audience hugging each other? or you go, as I've seen at certain concerts, where it creates that one element of brotherhood, rock festivals, or you're going to send them out to do a Kristallnacht
Yeah.
outside
Yeah.
afterwards.
Mhm.
So I think that it's not the mask itself here. That's
Mhm.
it's the way that it's used and it's the intention
Yeah.
behind it
No,
that we
yeah,
have to watch for.
I think the comparison is so good. Like if you compare Trump and Springsteen in these two situations, they are both more than just being, I
Yeah,
don't know, a person sitting and chatting. They are persona.
yeah,
They're a public persona, which we could call a mask. But they're also Trump. He might be lying through his teeth. He certainly does that, but he's also authentic. Like he actually speaks from his heart somehow, and Springsteen does the same. Like I think part of what has driven Trump is that he has been able to somehow be very yeah, you could call it authentic, and that's a different parameter than truth lies, right?
yeah.
And even like if you saw the recent speech with Hegseth, he came up and he was like Trump. He was talking about how he was thinking a lot about falling down when he was going down the stairs. He looked like a pitiful old man, but he was authentic still. He was just letting out what was inside his mind, weirdly, and so the like the distinction of where something goes bad
Yeah.
is I don't know where to point it out, but I think the image of Trump standing at these Nuremberg style sort of rallies or in
Mm.
front of a military parade at his flippin'
Hmm.
birthday,
Hmm.
and Springsteen sitting at the corner of the stage there with his
Hmm.
guitar. It's a really good image
Yeah,
of different performance
yeah.
of persona. Yeah.
So back into left and right. Um, in a sense, the left hasn't wanted to go out into this, into this sort of into Nuremberg when it comes down to it. Of
Mhm.
course, you've got Bernie Sanders who can do very effective speeches, but he doesn't go into the sort of
Mhm.
Trumpian MAGA world which has been created, which was the world of the hall to a certain extent. We're seeing very similar things. This
Mhm.
is how you create power. Is how the Roman emperors did it,
Mhm.
and the mask, when it comes down to it, is part of this. The taking the Pied Piper of Hamelin leading all of the children away.
Mhm.
To a certain extent, he's been doing it through music, but the mask will do it in the same way.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's an interesting space that is created as soon as the mask enters the room,
Mhm.
and it's a question what you're going to do with that
Yeah.
discomfort that
Yeah.
is created by the people in the audience when it
Mhm.
comes
And
down
the
to it.
power.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and it can create, as we look at the original Mask Ulebuk traditions of visiting each of the houses in the community and blessing them in one way or another by your presence and creating a community. This is also what's happening with the MAGA gatherings on a much, much
Mhm.
larger scale,
Yeah.
sort of us and them.
Mhm.
So we can say that the mask, be it an orange face or be it something else, be it a goat head. Actually, it's not far off it when we're looking at this bit of hair sticking over the top.
Yeah.
Somebody describes the dead raccoon on his head.
Yeah. I think there's something
But yeah,
about no kidding. I think there's something about that. Hitler also had the weird hair in his head. Like
yeah, absolutely
there's something
hair.
about the grotesque face, also the orange thing, and these sort of things.
Yeah, and the
It
horns.
does it does something weird.
Yeah,
It just does something weird.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
let me just turn back a little bit because you were talking about the. This was super interesting, by the way. But the hall as a where an all father deity
Yeah,
is perhaps bringing in young men,
yeah,
is that connected to the phenomenon of the berserker ulvhednir male groups? Is it connected to some of the stuff that was portrayed in the Northman movie, these initiatory situation? And does that then relate also to perhaps the broader phenomenon of Scandinavian aggression during the Viking Age? Perhaps you can just talk a little bit to
Well,
that, or I don't know. Maybe I drew the whole picture there. I don't know.
let's start off with the first thing. What's going on here when we look at what's sometimes called the comitatus, the brotherhood?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, you've got to, in a world of clans, a little bit like Scotland in later times, families. You belong to your family, to your area, to your it was blood belonging. And what, as I say, these rulers were having to do was to lure people away from that allegiance and create a new allegiance.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit like with blood brotherhood, for example, we hear about that ritual where you are sort of reborn as brothers. That's in a sense what's happening when you're joining up with the military group. You're becoming the ruler is like becoming your father. We hear the same thing as that. I think with Putin and the Tsars in Russia, they were little fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to create that in some way, and one way of doing it is, of course, the ritual, the blood brotherhood ritual, or whatever else. Same, but Hell's Angels is the most obvious connection. Joining the creation when you join the army, your band of brothers. In a sense that they are like your brothers. You're ready to die for them, with them, you're also ready to sort of die together into the next world, because we are the dead. And it's already, this is what you, as a soldier, you're sort of signing up for this, where you're already in the semi-space of being ready to die. This is a good day to die, the Native American idea as well. So you. This is what's happening within the hall, at least, and given this supernatural dimension by the ruler connecting themselves with Odin in one way or another. So you've left normal world, you've stepped into this sort of liminal world, which is strengthened by various rituals and various things that you have to go through. We see it all over the world, initiations of this kind, and certainly the Northman tries to show this, how you are initiated and how you step into another space of belonging. So you're ready to go abroad and die and leave the farm behind, leave your clan behind, leave your family behind, but you'll die for your brothers. It's essentially a very male group, and this is the same thing with the masking groups in the past. Tended to be young males pre-marriage, from late teens into early 20s. Again, the gang, the brotherhood, in the same way on the Viking ship. Again, you're belonging. Now, in terms of aggression, we talk a lot about gods of war, but just in general. But one thing we've been doing, there's another advert here. There's a new book about Freyr that's just come out. I'm one of the editors of this, Olof Sundqvist and Jens Peter Schött. But we've been looking at Freyr as a god. There, is he a fertility god or what? But when we talk about a god of war, I think there are two different types of gods of war. A fertility god, one of his jobs, if he is a fertility god, is also to make sure fertility can take place. And that needs peace. And how do you get peace? Well, I'm afraid we're back into Trump saying peace comes from destroying Gaza completely at the moment. That's why you should give him a Nobel Prize. But the peace you need, peace you need to be able to defend it. And so I think, in a sense, with Thor and with Freyr, we have defending gods. When we come to Odin, on the other hand, this is an invading god. This is the god of the war of the Germanic Danish war bands that went down into Rome. And moved up, I think, into Sweden later on. This is invading. So it depends why you want your army to be there. Certainly to defend yourself, but if you're creating a large army, or the big army as they called it, that invaded Britain, then this is aggression.
Hmm.
And of course, aggression is also involved in terms of defending.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to be ready to fight for your family
Hmm.
and your kids, your wife, and your land.
Yeah.
So aggression isn't necessarily. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be an invading aggression. It
Yeah.
can also be in terms of defense.
Hmm. Yeah. I would I would tend to think like, obviously, when I look at the Nordic gods, I look at them very much from the perspective of these West African deities,
Yeah,
and how they work, because they seem to me to be such incredibly similar structures.
yeah,
And uh, and I think, like, when you look at them, they can function. They often function in many different ways, and they often have the same functions, like curing people who are ill, or promoting people's career, making sure you get to be together with the people you would like to have sex with. There's a number of functions that are very much there, and sometimes they can be very contradictory. So, for instance, a deity of disease is also a deity of healing, and then that becomes an established function, and then other deities kind of, and like when I look at, for instance, the Nordic material, sometimes I feel that you see these sort of aspects where it seems that these deities are kind of have very similar functions, like the number of rune stones in Scandinavia, where the deity that is asked to sacralize runes is Thor. So it looks a little bit like, okay,
hmm
so it was maybe, maybe that was because Thor had generally sacralizing function. I don't know, but I sometimes feel that you see these deities having very similar, yeah, functions, that they kind of borrow from each other a little bit.
yeah,
Um,
exactly, yeah, exactly.
and we tend today, for instance, to think very much on Frey as a fertility god. But and I haven't read the book that you mentioned before there, but like it's not difficult
It only came out a week ago, so I'm not
okay, yeah, well.
expecting.
Well,
Yeah,
anything else that came out more a bit further down the road, I have read that, of
yeah,
course,
yeah, 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 yeah.
when it only came down a week ago. But
Thinking of what you were saying also about aggression. That again, there's another. Um, there was a folklore summer school which was looking at folklore and violence, and I wrote there.
yeah.
I was talking about the violence of the mask,
Hmm.
um, because there is a sort of almost implicit violence about it, in that it as the character enters the room, it changes, alters almost
Yeah.
quite violently what's going on within the space.
Hmm.
But also, as I've mentioned before, when you put the mask on, uh, you have a freedom to do a lot of things you wouldn't do otherwise.
Yeah.
And this is the slight the danger of the mask to a certain extent. You can say what you like because it's not you anymore. You can
Yeah.
do what you like. And this again perhaps brings us back to Orange Man and his mask and what he thinks he can do with
Hmm.
women at the same time. But the mask, in that discussion, I was certainly going from the original traditions, and often there is a lot of violence when the Eula book enters the room. We've got
Hmm.
pictures of it from Denmark, people being terrified. The same with the Krampus
Hmm.
but these other figures from Austria. Um, but when we go, even if we go into to modern times, take a look at what happened when Hamas invaded. These are people wearing masks again. When it comes down to it, look at the IDF and their
Hmm.
masks as
Yeah.
they come out. And this is the danger of the mask to a certain extent,
Yeah.
is the freedom that it gives you
Yeah.
to do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Which is another aspect of the mask we haven't actually talked about yet. But certainly the helmet, when you've
Yeah.
got that on, you have freedom to do all sorts of things, and
Hmm.
make use of the power that the mask gives you.
Yeah. And
In the
you can
moment.
almost, with a helmet like the Sutton Hoo helmet, you could almost see that as a symbolic portrayal of the ruler as outside of accountability.
Right.
that one thing
It
is that
wasn't
you
me.
can't see him as a human. What you
Right.
can see is the deity's face that has one eye and it's bird shaped in the
Absolutely.
eyebrows and these things. So there's
Yeah.
almost a portrayal of the ruler's right to transgress
Yeah.
normal ethical behavior.
Right. It
In
wasn't me within the
yeah,
Saturnalia. It was the moment. It was the time of madness,
yeah, yeah,
which we created, and that brings
yeah,
us again back to all sorts of things of the Nuremberg gatherings or whatever else.
yeah,
Wasn't me. Wasn't me.
yeah,
So
yeah. I bet
there are positive sides and positive sides and other and negative sides too to
yeah.
the mask. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm I'm a fan of the positive side.
Yeah.
I've
Absolutely.
I've been looking at the masking traditions that were connected with or that are found in specific parts of South America, specific parts of Southeast Asia, and specific parts of Africa, where there is a masking cult. And then they typically have initiatory rites in which and typically this is gendered. So that there would be the idea that men are walking through the community wearing masks and perhaps playing specific flutes. And then women and children need to hide inside the houses or huts. And they say that is the voices of the ancestors out there. And you're not supposed to look at the masks because you'll die. And there are ancestors inside the masks. Then at some point, a young man gets initiated into the mask mystery. And that mask mystery is the negation of the mask, the demasking, where the mask is taken away, and oh, it's just Uncle Johnny that's in there. And then
Absolutely.
all the men like have a good laugh at the face of the youngster who has been initiated, and then they tell him, "But you can never disclose that it's just us, the men, that are inside the masks. That can never be uttered.
Yeah.
That is the mystery." And these mask cults are sometimes the masks get so sacred that they stop existing as physical elements. So there's just a mask cult, and people get initiated to the mask, but it's not actually a physical object, the mask anymore. And anyway, I think there are really incredible aspects of mask.
Right.
Uh,
Now you brought up, and you can maybe find, I suppose, one of the most recent, apart from the violence of the mask article. There's another one that I wrote about traditions from Sardinia,
okay,
from the Mama, um, in a place called Mama Yada, the Mamatones, and this is a group of people dressed up in costumes. I can send you a link to that later on. But
definitely.
again, you've also raised something here, which is emotion connected to the
Mhm.
mask, and the closeness between laughter and horror,
Mhm.
which you see with children, especially the babies when they look at me. And there's this moment: am I going to laugh or am I going to cry?
Okay.
Is it dangerous? Who's this hairy figure just
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
at them? And same with looking at the gorilla in the zoo.
Mhm.
Laugh at it as long as the bars are there.
Yeah.
And as soon as the bars are suddenly taken down and it's loose, suddenly it turns into horror.
Yeah.
And this is the closeness of within that chaotic space, that Saturnalian space. A lot of these traditions, as you say, the Kachina with the clowns down in
Mhm.
the Pueblo areas of North America, they're clowns. People laugh
Yeah.
at them, with them. It's the clown, of course, always wears a mask. But
Yeah.
although people are unfortunately turning the clown into a horror figure in
Mhm.
more recent years, but again, we can see the closeness between the laughter and the horror
Yeah.
when you're dealing with a masked figure, because you don't know what's behind the face,
Mhm.
behind the mask. You don't
Yeah.
know how they're looking at you.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so,
And
so
you.
the
Yeah.
emotion is definitely there. How do you want to use it? Do
Yeah.
you want to use it to create horror, or do
Mhm.
you want to use it to create brotherhood and laughter?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
laughter comes when you feel safe.
Yeah.
That's the moment. That's the moment it turns into laughter.
Mhm.
You've decided that you're safe, and it's a funny figure rather than a frightening figure that's going to kill you.
Yeah.
So,
It what you're saying there makes me think. of a friend I have he's very good at doing these masking little events with children.
Mm.
So we do it typically at All Hallows Eve, and then typically he closes off the light, and then he kind of comes in as this sort of ghost figure with
Mm.
clanging chains and stuff like that,
Sweet.
and is scaring the kids. That's what it's about. He's scaring, and he's really good at kind of going to the edge and going a
Mm.
little bit above the edge, but not too much. They don't actually
Mm.
get traumatized, right? And that performance, it totally have that feeling that laughter and horror is there. They're so close to each other, and I can't help getting the thought that, is it like the reason that we see the carnival masking performance running out of hand today, is that
Mm.
because we have lost that in our normal popular culture, that we are playing more powerfully with it. I mean, we still have Santa Claus and these sort of things,
Mm.
but I think it has a different power when it's done where, for instance, actual fear is there, but it's also funny, and those feelings are sort of being experienced and negotiated in the masking performance. Perhaps that, I don't know, gives us something that we're missing a little bit
Mm.
when
Mm.
we look at the maskers
Yeah.
in
But I think it's
our.
for everybody, certainly those listening, um, look at it from two sides. First of all, how you feel when you face somebody who's wearing a mask, and how do you feel if you have a mask on looking out at them?
Mm,
So being in or dealing with, and what does it do to you
yeah,
in each case?
yeah,
And how
totally.
do you want it to be used? How do you want it to be used?
Mm, yeah,
For horror or for laughter, for togetherness or division? You know?
totally, totally. And the experience of putting on a mask, I have the experience from, because we were having this playful masking thing in Copenhagen, where I bought a rubber mask and in a shop, and made a costume, and I really started to feel that costume had, that there was a personality in it that sort of
Mm.
came out when I put it on, and I think
Mm.
that
Mm.
experience is probably um, it's probably a step on the way to a full, for instance, Afro-Brazilian masking performance, where you're actually having a procession going on, or the Anglo-Saxon king who puts on the Sutton Hoo mask, and what actually happens there. I imagine that is probably more intense, but it's a step on
Yeah.
the way,
Just
perhaps.
wait a second. Even though you're recording, wait a second. I'm going to just. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So, for your audience, at least, as soon as this figure becomes, so what happens when the mask is there,
Yeah.
and it changes things. So just to sort of
Yeah.
side by
Wow.
side, in a sense, these figures. What does it do? So I think we need to show a mask at least at
Yeah,
some
yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah.
So
I should have
again,
gotten
as soon,
one.
as soon as it comes on,
Yeah,
and as soon as it's taken off,
yeah,
what is the difference?
totally.
I've often done this with my students, at least. And
Hmm.
as you're talking to them in class, and you leave the stage, leave the front of the class, and go up to them and look at them,
Yeah,
and it's uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah.
It's,
And is
so
tell
yeah,
me, Terry, isn't there also something about our interpretation? Like when you put this on now, and you just shift your head a little bit,
absolutely.
then it is as if our expectation of some sort of expression or emotion is kind of projected into that, just that little movement, in a different way than if we can actually see your face.
Absolute, and in a sense, the inanimate has become animate.
Yeah,
In a sense,
yeah.
the piece of this is a Sardinian mask, one of those ones I talked about.
It's amazing, by the
Um,
way.
it's a sort of Grilla, wonderful figure, but
Yeah,
carved. But yeah, as you say, it's here. It's just wood.
yeah,
But as soon as it comes on here, and
yeah, yeah.
it
And
starts,
yeah, yeah,
it becomes a character. It's something different.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember the feeling very much from the movie V for Vendetta, where you have this masked Avenger. You probably remember the movie, and that the actor's just turning his head ever so slightly, and it just like it's just that movement, just it beams a lot of sort of
The statue has
expression
come to
somehow.
life. The
Yeah,
statue has come to life, and
yeah,
this is what it's about.
yeah. Great.
I suppose if any of your listeners are into Doctor Who, you've got the weeping statues at least, which are again in the same sort of idea that a
Yeah,
statue, and when a statue suddenly moves, yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, so that brings us directly into the back to the mask that we started
yeah,
off
yeah.
with. Yeah,
Great. Yeah, I think we've gotten around a lot of stuff here
we've
now,
done
and
a,
this
done a
is
circle here.
we moved around a lot, and thank you very much,
My pleasure. It's been
Terry.
nice chatting with you. And
Yes, super interesting topic, and yeah, hope to.
he says goodbye to.
Okay. Bye there, Sardinian gorilla. Cool,
Cheers.
and see you around, man.
Cheers.
Där bergast fyrer frälsning och ängan rättlátan skalset hälsing varje kur risar och trött vågnade stridsmän ganga och vötter varje kur risar och trött vågnade stridsmän ganga och vötter